You say you're confused. You say you're thinking it through. But you already know. You just won't do it. Because doing it means consequence. And consequence means you can't pretend anymore. A man sits in a coffee shop with his laptop open, job listings on one tab, fantasy football on the other. He clicks back and forth for an hour, never replies, tells himself it wasn't the right fit. He leaves with nothing, but just enough guilt to call it effort. This pattern rewards delay. Modern life is engineered for mental loops. You never have to choose. You just hover. Every app, every policy, every social rule keeps you spinning in the same place. That's not by accident. That's the design. Men who hesitate are easier to manage. Men who calculate endlessly never revolt. This system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. You weren't trained to act, you were trained to second-guess. First by parents who punished risk, then by teachers who graded obedience, then by jobs that offered security in exchange for silence. The message never changed. Don't move until you're told. So now you don't. You scroll. You doubt. You explain. You wait for signs. You talk about ideas you'll never execute. You play chess with ghosts, building a life in your head that never makes it to your feet. And when nothing changes, you blame the world for being unfair. But you were never stopped. You just never started. The truth is simple and violent. You don't act because you don't want responsibility. You want safety with the illusion of control. But control without risk is a fantasy. And every year you spend trying to think your way into certainty, you fall deeper into paralysis disguised as wisdom. Here's what that looks like. You stay in a relationship you hate because breaking up would mean being alone and explaining yourself. So you invent reasons to stay. You call it loyalty, but it's fear. You have a business idea. You've had it for 5 years. You tell yourself you're waiting for the market to shift, for your schedule to clear, for a better network. But the real reason is this: if you try, you might fail. And if you fail, there's no one left to blame. You think your indecision makes you deep. It doesn't. It makes you avoidant. It makes you passive. You think it's mature to weigh all sides. But you're not weighing anything. You're delaying the moment you'll have to look yourself in the eye and admit you're scared of your own life. There's no mystery here. No philosophical dilemma. No spiritual riddle. Just a basic refusal to move. Because moving means exposure. Moving means change. Moving means other people watching you fall and no longer being able to hide behind what-ifs. That's what you're actually protecting. Your exit plan. Your right to say, I could have, but you'd rather die with potential than live with proof. Because potential is clean. Action is messy. Potential gets respect. Action gets judged. And that's the center of this sickness, your addiction to image. You want to be seen as capable without ever proving it. You want reputation without risk, confidence without cost, power without pain. You say you're trying to figure things out, but that's not true. You already know what needs to go. You already know what needs to start. You already know what needs to be said. You just don't want to live with the consequences. So you loop. You read one more book. Watch one more podcast. Rebuild your resume for the 7th time. Text your ex just to check in. You do anything except the one thing that would change everything. Move. Because if you move, the fantasy dies. The future becomes real. And reality means you have to live with your own decisions, not your imagined potential. That terrifies you more than failure. But here's the final layer. Every time you stall, you become less. Not metaphorically, neurologically. Every decision you avoid rewires you to avoid the next one. You're training your brain to equate hesitation with safety. And eventually, hesitation becomes identity. You no longer know what it feels like to act, only to react. That's not intelligence. That's slow-motion suicide. You've built an entire identity on being the guy who's working on himself. But working on yourself isn't living. And self-awareness doesn't count if it never leads to action. Insight without change is just masturbation with better vocabulary. So here it is, plain. You're not confused. You're just afraid of what happens if you stop pretending. And no one's coming to save you from that choice. You didn't build your life. You inherited a script and followed it without blinking. You call yourself a man who makes his own choices, but every choice you've made was pre-approved. Career, marriage, house, retirement plan. None of it was vision. It was fear with a calendar. The lie is this: stability equals success. It sounds harmless. It sounds smart, but it's the most efficient prison ever made. You were trained to want it, then trapped by the reward. A man climbs the corporate ladder for 20 years. Title improves. Pay improves. Spine erodes. Energy collapses. Meaning gone. But he smiles at conferences and says, busy, but grateful. He doesn't believe it. But he knows the alternative, and it terrifies him more than misery. A divorced man in his 40s keeps texting his ex. Not for love, but because she was his context. Without her, his life looks like rubble. He tells himself he's being civil. What he really wants is to avoid silence. Because silence might reveal the truth. His whole identity was proximity, not purpose. Stability sedates. That's why it works. You don't notice the decay. You notice the disruptions. So you cling to routine. You call it structure. It's really just scaffolding for collapse. Here's how it pays you. It rewards you with predictability while draining your instinct. It offers safety while killing your ability to change. It protects your image while stealing your agency. The lie teaches you to avoid extremes, to compromise, to calculate. You stop trusting your hunger. You stop making sharp cuts. You trade movement for management, risk for comfort. And in time, you lose the part of yourself that knew how to act without permission. By 45, you've mastered this system. You know how to smile at the client you hate. You know how to nod when your doctor says normal aging. You know how to laugh when your friends talk about giving up. You think this is strength. It's not. It's resignation. With polish. This system keeps you just happy enough to not implode, and just numb enough to not rebel. Even your suffering fits the mold. You're burned out. You're figuring things out. You're transitioning. But these are just updated names for submission. You're not in transition. You're stuck. And the system's genius is it taught you to call stuckness adulthood. You don't feel dead. You feel responsible. You feel disciplined. You feel stable. That's the trick. You don't need chains if the cage is designed like a promotion. The lie isn't that stability is bad. The lie is that stability is earned. It's not. It's sold. And you bought it with your fire, your urgency, your hunger. You didn't evolve. You folded. Here's the cut you've avoided. You never chose your job. You just never left it. You never chose your marriage. You just never questioned it. You never chose your life. You just kept moving through it, afraid to stop and see where you actually were. And now you're here, midlife, with a checklist complete and a soul that whispers, this isn't it. But there's no one left to blame. No system, no mentor, no woman, no parent, just you. And the echo of all the things you didn't do. You called it being a man, but it was fear. You called it responsibility, but it was surrender. You called it success, but it was the cost of staying asleep. Now open your eyes. Look at the bars. You built them. He's sitting in the car, parked outside his house. Engine off. Phone in hand. He's been there for 40 minutes. Inside, his wife is pissed, his kids are loud, the food is cold. He told himself he was unwinding, but he's just afraid to walk through the door. He doesn't speak unless spoken to. He doesn't say what he means. He doesn't push back, raise his voice, take a stand. He keeps things peaceful, but every night, something inside him rots from silence. At work, a younger guy interrupts him. He laughs it off. Later, in the bathroom, he rehearses the line he should have said. In the mirror, he looks at his own face and feels nothing. Not anger, not shame, just the dull ache of a man who no longer recognizes himself. He says yes before thinking. He says no with a smile. He's agreeable, flexible, dependable, which means this: he's invisible, not because the world doesn't see him, but because he never gave it anything real to look at. This is the cost of obedience. He thought being steady made him strong. It didn't. It made him forgettable. To his boss, to his wife, to his friends, even to himself. He's lived decades without hunger, without edge, without fire. Because fire burns bridges, and he needed everyone intact. Now, there's nothing left to burn, and still no one's coming across. As Nietzsche warned, a man who obeys too long forgets how to desire. Desire is dangerous. It disrupts. So he buried it. At first with practicality, then with routine, eventually with distraction, streaming, projects, fitness trackers, anything that gave the illusion of forward motion. But there's no motion, just maintenance. He built a life that runs like a machine, and now he's part of it, greased, necessary, replaceable. He thought he was being responsible, but it was fear. The kind you can't name. The kind that wears a suit and gets applause for staying late. He thought patience would pay off. That being the steady hand, the good man, the quiet rock would earn him peace. But peace never came, only more to manage. And now it's 3 a.m. He's awake in the dark. The ceiling fan spins. The woman next to him feels like a roommate. He scrolls his phone. Same headlines. Same messages. Same faces pretending they're not dying inside. He puts the phone down. Stares at the wall. No panic. Just the silent question he's tried to outrun for years. Is this it? He can't cry. He's too numb. He can't rage. It would scare him. He can't sleep. There's nothing left to dream about. Just tasks. Just timelines. Just survival. He remembers the last time he said no. Really said it. Said it without apology, without a backup plan. He can't remember. Every no became a maybe. Every maybe became a yes. That's how he stayed safe. That's how he disappeared. He remembers when he wanted more. When he was younger, hungrier. Before the mask fused with the skin. Before he learned how to act like a man instead of being one. But now he's tired. Not physically, spiritually. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep. The kind that comes from knowing you've betrayed something you'll never get back. And there's no one to blame. No trauma to revisit. No story to reframe. Just the raw fact of a life built on compromise. Until compromise became character. He wanted respect, but he traded it for comfort. He wanted love, but he settled for peace. He wanted meaning, but he chose consistency. Now the cracks are visible. In his face. In his posture. In the way people interrupt him without noticing. In the way his own son talks to him like an assistant. This isn't depression. This is clarity. He's not confused. He's hollow. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded at becoming exactly what was asked of him. And it wasn't enough. A man sits in his office after hours. Lights off. Computer glowing. No music. No podcast. No noise. Just numbers on a screen and the silent knowledge that none of them matter. Not to him. Not anymore. He doesn't feel pain. He feels data. Years burned. Choices calculated. Outcomes hollow. He finally understands. The system doesn't malfunction. The system consumes. And he was one of the willing. This is where Nietzsche begins. Not with salvation, but with severance. To become free, first you must stop pretending you belong. Nietzsche's answer was not therapy. It was divorce. From obedience. From comfort. From the herd. The man who reclaims his will must amputate everything that doesn't serve it. No ceremony. No closure. Just the cut. That's what the Übermensch means. Not a better man. A separate one. Not stronger. Not kinder. Untied. This is not evolution. It's escape. Start with the cleanest move. Stop explaining yourself. No more justifying why you feel off. Why you want out. Why the meetings make you sick. Why the good life leaves you dead inside. You don't owe them a reason. Their system is the disease, not your rejection of it. You don't burn bridges. You walk away before they exist. That's what will feels like. Not rebellion. Irrelevance. Picture it. A man stops knocking. He sees the door was never closed. It was just fake. Decorative. There to keep him hopeful, not to let him through. So he stops asking. Stops hoping. And walks past it. Not to a better room, but to no room at all. Because only then does he belong to himself. This is the turn Nietzsche demands. Kill the false gods. Then build nothing in their place. You don't need a plan. You need subtraction. Every identity that made you obedient? Cut. Every title that made you visible but weak? Cut. Every relationship that kept you useful but silent? Cut. Wool is not loud. It is clean. It is the part of you that doesn't ask permission because it knows it already owns the consequences. You want clarity? Strip everything down to this question. Am I choosing this? Or am I complying? That's it. That's the knife. Every time you ask that honestly, something will fall off. A fake friendship, a job title, a performance, a version of you that never really existed, just adapted. Nietzsche didn't offer peace. He offered war with delusion. A man without illusions does not feel lighter. He feels accurate. Precision is not joy. It is power. Now you see the architecture. You were never tired. You were sedated. You were never confused. You were domesticated. You were never weak. You were loyal to something that used you. There is no return. There is only forward, and forward begins with indifference. You don't need to announce this. You don't need to explain it to your wife, your friends, your boss. You just stop playing the part. You don't flinch when the silence hits. You let it hit. That's the audit. And when nothing responds, you know you're finally alone. Which means you're finally free. Not because you've escaped suffering, but because you've stopped calling the cage home. You said you were confused, said you needed time, said you were waiting for clarity. But now you know that was never true. You weren't confused. You were controlled by comfort, by the fear of loss, by the pressure to stay consistent with a life you no longer respect. You thought your stillness was caution. It was compliance. You called it maturity. It was managed surrender. There was nothing noble about your patience. It was submission in slow motion, dressed in adult words. You know it now because the moment you stopped pretending, nothing collapsed. Your life didn't shatter. The sky didn't fall. The only thing that died was the illusion that you ever needed permission. Look back at every yes you gave while dying inside. Every smile that kept the peace. Every hour you spent proving something to people who weren't watching. That wasn't strategy. That was abandonment of yourself by yourself. You nodded through disrespect. You swallowed your voice in meetings. You planned weekends around people you resented. You lived like a man waiting for a verdict. But the jury was never real. Just your fear of being alone with a decision. Now you've seen the mechanism. Now you know why you stayed quiet. Why you said maybe when you meant no. Why you lowered your gaze in moments that required steel. It wasn't humility. It was the muscle memory of a man who forgot he was allowed to want. And here's the truth you can't unlearn. Nothing about your life was neutral. Every delay trained you to delay more. Every apology that kept you comfortable cost you something real. Every time you bit your tongue, you taught the world to ignore your teeth. This is not a turning point. This is a fracture. Because once you've seen it, there's no clean return. Not to that job. Not to that marriage. Not to that mask. You can still wear it, but you'll taste the glue now. You'll feel the heat underneath. You'll know. And that's the problem. Now you know. Which means every fake laugh after this is betrayal. Every passive yes is self-harm. Every delay is a choice to die a little more. You wanted clarity. You got it. Now carry it. Or go back to pretending. But don't say you didn't see. Don't say you didn't know. Don't say you weren't warned. You said you were confused. But now the silence knows better. So do I. So do you. Let's see if you have the stomach to say it out loud.